When to be active, when to be passive. That's step number 3 of the 5 miraculous things you can do to finally get married. That's episode 6 coming up next on Solving Jewish Singleness with Liz Wallenstein, the therapist that gets it. So you must know that your experience of being single is your test, and you should invest in passing it more than anything else. That should be the number 1 priority of yours to create that miracle. So I'm going to tell you about 3 things today of how to do that. The first one is choose growth. Now, when I shared with you in episode 3, the story of my test, with cancer, a lot of times when people hear that story, they'll say to me, wow, that's amazing. I never would have been able to respond that way. But the truth is, your test might actually be harder than mine, because when you have something big like cancer, that's going to grab your attention. That, kind of makes it obvious that something big is going on. Most people's test is a lot more subtle than that, which is why I feel the need to talk about this. One of the things that kind of, hit me in the face when I made it to the other side, when I got married, is that marriage, and then when you start having children, your challenges, come at you nonstop. You are constantly and consistently being given opportunities to sink or swim. You are constantly being put in opportunities to stretch yourself, to grow. Now, as a single person, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of opportunities for growth, but it's a lot more passive. It's a lot more subtle. The tests and the challenges that you have as a single person are easier to ignore. They're easier to deny. They're easier to put off. And so that's why it makes it so important to know that this is your test, is look for the opportunities to grow, look for the opportunities to make better decisions, to become a better person, to stretch yourself, because they're not necessarily going to be knocking at your door the way that they might in another stage of life. So that's something that you have to be especially tuned into as a single person, and it can make all the difference if you see those opportunities and seize those opportunities. The next thing that I want to talk about in terms of passive versus active and how to respond to this being a test is align with Hashem. So sometimes when it feels like God has abandoned you, that might actually be Him standing right in front of you. You see, I find that one of the main sources of struggle for people is that they feel they know better. We are often trying to convince God to, do what we want, get Him on our page. But where the real magic happens and where change really occurs is when you learn how to get on God's page. So instead of trying to force the outcome, instead of trying to control the situation, I've talked before about control versus surrender. What would it be like to be more present, to focus more on the process than the outcomes? Ride the wave, be open, see how things unfold. Like, instead of focusing so much on the end game, just focus on what's my response to what's in front of me today. How do I work with the things that are in front of me right now in this moment? Use this as an opportunity to trust in God, to expect good from Him, to allow yourself to feel His love for you by looking for the good and looking for what He is doing for you. Instead of trying to steer your life in the direction that you feel it should be in, try to want the circumstances that you already find yourself in. The third thing that I think is important in how to respond to this as a test is, don't let the process embitter you, let it humble you. So one of the questions that I get is, would I have chosen my husband if not for my experience with cancer right before meeting him? And my honest answer to that is, I don't know about the cancer, but my nightmare ride with singleness probably had a lot to do with it. Because my experience of singleness was much worse than my experience of cancer. I had much more suffering and struggle with my many years of singleness than I did with that temporary, manageable, that I was able to make positive time with cancer. So, you know, if I had met my husband in my 20s, I don't know that I would have married him. And the reason is, I think at that point in my life, I would have focused on the differences. I would have focused on what wasn't there. My husband and I, we have much different pasts. We have much different backgrounds. Like, he just didn't feel familiar to me. He didn't just kind of like pop right into my life. And I don't know if I would have gotten past that when I was in my 20s. But here's what he was, what he is. When he looked at me, he saw what was there and not what wasn't. He had no complaints for me. And not because he thought I was perfect. He saw my imperfections. He saw my flaws. He just didn't care. And he wanted to give to me. It made him happy to make me happy. And once I had that in my life, that's when I realized what had been missing up until then and what I could not go another day without. And so the difference with that was that, you know, I say for me, real love is humbling. Instead of thinking about what I wasn't getting or, you know, what might be even better match for me, I appreciated and I fell in love with his goodness, with his character, with how he treated me, with just my awe of how special he was. And I think that what enabled that change to happen, it was kind of my progression. It was kind of my graduation, because of all my experiences up until then, I allowed them to help me grow and develop in a place where I could appreciate that and recognize it and notice it and want it in my life. If you're feeling worn out, good. Let your experiences wear you out to the point that you realize what's really important, what you really need, what's really going to make you happy versus what's not. Maybe what was on your list or you were treating as important that really isn't going to make a big difference in the scheme of things. So to sum up, when to be active, when to be passive, and what role that plays in recognizing this as your test and passing your test. So you can pass your test actively by looking for your test and choosing growth. Choose how to use your experiences to make you a better person, to be doing more good, and to stretch yourself, to challenge yourself. The passive way to pass your test is, instead of fixating on the outcomes, instead of trying to steer the direction that your life goes in, try instead to appreciate and to embrace wherever it is that you do find yourself. Use this as an opportunity to build trust, to expect good, to kind of just ride the wave and be open and let the goodness in.
If you thought this recording was helpful, please share it on social media so that it gets to more people that it can help. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel and like this video. If you're interested in therapy sessions with me online, please contact me through my website or my email or social media. Feel free to send me questions and suggestions of what you'd like to hear me talk about through social media or my website, lizwallensteintherapy.com. Best of luck to you on your journey. I hope to hear good news soon.